My ex-con who built a billion-dollar empire. I never imagined my life would collapse in a single night. One moment I was closing deals, shaking hands, living a life I built with sweat and loyalty. The next, flashing lights, sirens, and officers in my living room. Damien, my best friend since childhood, and Marin, my fiancée, watched me cuffed as if I were a stranger. Their betrayal cut deeper than the iron on my wrists. I was accused of embezzling millions from the company we started together. Evidence? Forged. Witnesses? Manipulated. Everything pointed to me, and no one believed my words. I spent that night in a cell, staring at cold concrete, realizing the people I loved had conspired against me. I had lost my freedom, my reputation, and the trust I'd placed in them. The humiliation wasn't just legal, it was personal. Every news outlet painted me as the villain. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered. If they thought prison would break me, they didn't know me at all. I would survive. I would rise. And one day, they would regret the night they stole my life. The first week in prison was pure terror. Men who had nothing to lose stared at me like prey. I couldn't cry, I couldn't scream. Survival demanded silence. But as days turned into months, I began observing. Every hierarchy, every weakness, every ally and enemy became data. Damien had thought this would break me. Marin had thought I'd disappear. They had no idea I was learning. I studied strategy, manipulation, and human nature from the people society had thrown away. I listened to conversations through concrete walls, noted patterns in guards, routines, and even made tentative alliances. I refused to let rage dictate my actions. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a war. I also began writing plans, future schemes, blueprints for revenge. Prison forged my patience. I could wait decades if needed. While others sought temporary dominance, I sought permanent leverage. They wanted me broken, humiliated, powerless. But by the time I left, they would see that I had transformed every ounce of suffering into fuel. I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming a weapon. Not all news from the outside was bad. My lawyer, a tired man with more conscience than most, found fragments of Damien's betrayal buried in legal documents. Marin had signed off on transactions in my name, transferring wealth and assets to Damien's shell companies. My heart sank, but my resolve hardened. I realized they hadn't just ruined me. They'd been grooming themselves to take everything I'd built. Letters from distant relatives were cautiously sympathetic, afraid of crossing Damien. My isolation was near total, yet I discovered something invaluable, proof that patience and intelligence outweighed brute force. I began crafting subtle tests, requests for outside intelligence, careful questions about Marin and Damien's movements. Every piece of information became a chess piece. I imagined every meeting, every handshake, every secret they had believed hidden from me. I made mental notes. This wasn't just about reclaiming money. It was about exposing the people who had turned love and friendship into weapons. When I finally walked out of those gates, it would be on my terms, with a precision they would never anticipate. And I vowed to make the world watch. The day I left prison, the air felt alien. Freedom tasted bitter, tinged with years of injustice. Damien had already secured my apartment, claiming I abandoned it. Marin had given interviews describing me as unstable, unfit, and dangerous. Friends had turned away. I walked through streets that seemed both familiar and hostile, realizing that the real prison wasn't the walls. It was the world outside, where betrayal wore a polished suit. I rented a small apartment, disconnected from my old life, and began assembling my arsenal. Investments, contacts, legal loopholes, everything I could access while staying invisible. I studied Damien's empire from afar, noting cracks, vulnerabilities, and arrogance that only comes from someone who believes they are untouchable. Every betrayal fueled me. Every slight sharpened my mind. While Damien flaunted wealth and Marin played the loving ex, I worked quietly, building a new identity as an unstoppable force. They had underestimated my intelligence, my patience, and my hunger for justice. I was no longer the naive man who had trusted them blindly. I was the storm gathering strength in silence, waiting for the perfect moment. I started small, testing the waters. One discreet investment here, a strategic partnership there, Damien didn't notice. Marin remained wrapped up in her illusions, but I observed their mistakes, overconfidence, greed, and disregard for anyone beneath them. I exploited every weakness. A missing contract, a poorly secured account, a careless lawyer. Slowly, imperceptibly, cracks formed in the empire they believed untouchable. I never bragged, never revealed my hand. The thrill wasn't just in vengeance. It was in watching justice unfold like clockwork. I also tested allies cautiously, ensuring loyalty. Each success became a confidence boost, reinforcing the fact that brilliance and patience could topple giants. By the end of that month, I had quietly redirected small flows of wealth into my control, unnoticed by Damien. He thought the ex-con he ruined had vanished. He was wrong. The world had not seen the final chapter of my story. And when it came, they would be powerless to stop it. I wasn't seeking revenge in anger. I was claiming it in strategy. Damien thrived on arrogance. It was his greatest weakness. He assumed everyone around him bowed to his will, that no one could penetrate his gilded walls. I watched from shadows, learning his schedule, his habits, and his insecurities. Every public interview, every social post revealed a tiny chink in the armor of his empire. I began cultivating contacts, lawyers, investors, even employees disillusioned with his ruthlessness. Slowly, I inserted myself into his network without revealing my identity. Damien believed the world belonged to him. Marin believed she was untouchable, but I knew one wrong move would unravel everything. I orchestrated minor disruptions, delayed shipments, missed meetings, quiet legal inquiries, all without revealing my hand. It wasn't chaos, it was chess. The empire that had humiliated me was brittle beneath its golden facade. And as I prepared the first major strike, I felt a rush of anticipation. This wasn't just about money. It was about exposing the people who had taken everything from me. And Damien's blind spots were about to cost him more than he ever imagined. It started as whispers, small anomalies that employees noticed but couldn't explain. A financial discrepancy here, a missing report there. Damien dismissed them as mistakes. Marin scoffed at rumors, but I knew better. Each tiny ripple I created was part of a larger plan. I had learned to manipulate systems, exploit overconfidence, and sow doubt without exposing myself. By leveraging my network of allies and quiet legal research, I discovered skeletons buried in their contracts, loopholes, forged signatures, unreported liabilities. And I began feeding subtle information to key people in their circle, enough to make them question Damien's leadership. It was a game of perception. Let them feel secure while everything around them quietly unraveled. Marin, blinded by vanity, failed to see the cracks forming beneath her feet. The whispers grew, infecting confidence, creating tension, and slowly isolating the duo from those who once supported them. And all the while, I remained invisible, calculating the precise moment to strike. When it came, there would be no redemption for them, only the cold, hard exposure they so richly deserved. While Damien faltered, I rebuilt my reputation piece by piece. I approached investors cautiously, presenting myself as an anonymous yet brilliant strategist. Every successful partnership, every quietly executed deal strengthened my leverage. I refused to be hasty. Patience had become my weapon. Friends and former allies had turned away during my imprisonment, but now doors that had once slammed in my face opened, slowly, tentatively. I used the knowledge of Damien's empire to my advantage. Where he was reckless, I was meticulous. Where he burned bridges, I built alliances. Slowly, a pattern emerged. My influence grew quietly, unnoticed by Damien and Marin, who were too consumed by greed and image to realize the danger creeping closer. I tested my moves like a surgeon, precise and deliberate. The world believed the ex-con was irrelevant. I had no intention of proving them wrong with words. I would prove it with action. The empire that humiliated me would collapse not through chaos, but through calculated brilliance. The first public crack appeared quietly, almost imperceptibly. Damien's investors began questioning financial irregularities. A major deal fell apart due to mismanagement I had subtly exposed. Rumors of instability spread through industry circles. shaking confidence in an empire built on arrogance. Marin panicked behind closed doors, sending frantic texts, trying to cover errors that only she and Damien could cause. Employees whispered about the ghost ex-con who seemed to haunt the edges of their organization. Every small disruption I orchestrated was deliberate, carefully timed to maximize tension, confusion, and doubt. The public saw mistakes. Internally, chaos brewed. And as the first domino fell, I stayed hidden, invisible, letting their empire eat itself alive. I didn't gloat, I didn't taunt. My satisfaction came from knowing patience and strategy were finally winning where brute force and betrayal had failed. Damien's world was cracking, and when I emerged from the shadows, he would finally understand that the ex-con he had scorned had never been powerless, only waiting. It wasn't just about business, it was personal. I arranged for subtle leaks of information tying Marin to fraudulent contracts and secret transfers. Her image, carefully curated for public admiration, began to unravel. Social media discussions, whispers in industry circles, and anonymous tips to watchdogs created pressure she couldn't escape. She tried damage control, but every attempt only exposed another lie, another betrayal. Damien, meanwhile, became desperate, reaching for solutions that were already out of reach. I remained meticulous, using legal loopholes, hidden partnerships, and strategic influence to tighten the noose without ever being seen. My revenge wasn't fueled by rage, it was precision. Each move reminded me of the humiliation I had endured, the injustice of years wasted. And yet I felt calm, almost serene, because this time I controlled the narrative. I wasn't an ex-con haunted by the past. I was the architect of justice, the shadow they had ignored, and the force that would ensure every betrayal had a consequence. The empire that had destroyed me was now fragile, trembling beneath the weight of its own hubris. A former employee reached out to me, trembling, speaking in hushed tones about Damien's latest shady dealings. I had cultivated this network carefully, gaining the trust of those who had quietly suffered under his reign. Every detail mattered: the hidden accounts, the shell companies, the deals built on lies. This insider didn't know I had been watching for years, learning every pattern, every weakness. I recorded every confession, every misstep, without them realizing how it would become ammunition. It wasn't revenge for them, it was revenge for me, for all the humiliation, the years lost, the betrayal I had endured. As I pieced together this puzzle, I realized how fragile Damien's empire truly was. His arrogance blinded him, his overconfidence left him exposed. I smiled quietly, knowing the final act was near. Patience had been my ally, observation my weapon, and now the insider's tip would become the spark that ignited a fire no one could contain. Damien had underestimated the ex-con, and he would soon pay dearly. I orchestrated a leak to a major financial news outlet, revealing discrepancies in Damien's latest acquisitions. Overnight, his carefully constructed reputation began to crumble. Analysts questioned his judgment, investors hesitated, partners demanded explanations he couldn't provide. Marin's social media defenses only made her appear desperate, shallow, and dishonest. Employees whispered about rumors of bankruptcy, fraud, and mismanagement. Damien called frantic meetings, blaming everyone but himself. I watched from the shadows, invisible, knowing every desperate move was predictable. This wasn't chaos, it was inevitability. My ex-con past gave me patience, perspective, and grit. I had endured humiliation far worse than this. Now I was the architect of justice. The cracks widened daily, and with each passing moment, the duo who had tormented me felt the walls closing in. They thought they were untouchable, but the world was beginning to see them for what they were: manipulators, fraudsters, and opportunists. I felt no guilt, only satisfaction, because this time, power and cunning were finally on my side. It wasn't just business betrayal, it was personal. I dug deeper and discovered Damien had secretly sabotaged my family's investments, and Marin had publicly humiliated my sister during a gala to assert dominance. The lies they spun over the years were woven into everything I held dear. I documented every email, every signed but falsified contract, every public smear, carefully building evidence. My rage was quiet but burning. The humiliation I had suffered, the prison, the whispers, the scorn, was now being translated into calculated strategy. I had the power to expose them to the world, and I would do it in a way that left no room for escape. Every betrayal, every lie, every insult would be accounted for. And when the revelation hit, it would destroy not only their empire but their reputation, influence, and social standing. The personal sting was coming, and it would be precise, surgical, and merciless. I reached out to those Damien had betrayed over the years, disgruntled investors, former employees, even competitors. I didn't need their loyalty, I needed leverage. Slowly, they became my invisible army. They whispered their own experiences, offered documentation, and provided insight into Damien's weaknesses I hadn't yet uncovered. I coordinated small, seemingly unrelated actions, legal inquiries, whistleblower tips, and minor regulatory audits that combined into a perfect storm. Marin remained unaware of the growing pressure. Damien fumed, desperate for solutions he couldn't grasp. I had learned patience in prison. I had learned strategy in isolation. Now I was executing the most meticulous plan of my life. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about justice, about reclaiming dignity, about showing the world that arrogance and manipulation had consequences. My allies were hidden, my identity discreet, and my purpose clear. Every betrayal they had inflicted would return tenfold. And when the final moment arrived, no one would see me coming, but everyone would feel the impact. The day arrived. Financial regulators, media outlets, and investors converged, each piece of evidence I had gathered now surfacing simultaneously. Damien's empire began to crumble publicly, a spectacle of arrogance turned to ruin. Marin's carefully curated image collapsed online. Social media lit up with scandals, allegations, and leaked documents. Employees quit en masse. Partners withdrew support. Damien raged behind closed doors, oblivious to the source of the attack. And I watched calm, knowing the ex-con who once suffered humiliation now orchestrated the ultimate reckoning. This wasn't chaos, it was precision. Every betrayal was accounted for, every humiliation returned, every injustice highlighted. The empire they built with greed, lies, and manipulation fell, brick by brick, to the foundation I had quietly undermined. And for the first time in years, I felt complete satisfaction, not vengeance in the reckless sense, but the justice I had longed for. Damien and Marin would never forget this day, and neither would I. By now, Damien was unraveling. The media firestorm had exposed every flaw in his empire, but he still didn't know who was orchestrating it. He lashed out at colleagues, made irrational deals, and threw his wealth at problems that couldn't be solved with money. I watched quietly, knowing each mistake was deliberate proof of his overconfidence. His panic was delicious to observe, a stark contrast to the calm I had cultivated. Every lie he had told, every betrayal he had inflicted was now a weapon against him. I didn't need to reveal myself yet. Let him collapse from his own hubris while I controlled the narrative from the shadows. And Marin, she was spiraling even faster, trying to protect an image she no longer had. Pride can't survive truth, and truth was my ally. Every desperate move they made only tightened the net. By the end of this week, they wouldn't recognize the empire they had spent years building, or the world that now watched their downfall. I had one final card, the documents Damien thought had been destroyed years ago. Legal contracts, offshore accounts, fraudulent signatures, evidence of a lifetime of lies. It had taken months to obtain them without suspicion, maneuvering through lawyers, accountants, and intermediaries. I held the key to public exposure to complete humiliation, but timing was everything. If released too soon, it could be dismissed. Too late, and they could attempt cover-ups. I studied every detail, ensuring no loophole remained. These papers would reveal not only financial deception but personal betrayal, how Damien had manipulated friends, family, and even romantic partners for his gain. Marin had colluded silently, complicit in every scheme. I smiled as I imagined the shock when these hidden truths surfaced simultaneously with ongoing investigations. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. Every whisper, every rumor, every hint of scandal I had fed to the press and regulators now converged, unstoppable. Their empire would fall, their names tarnished, their reputation shattered, and I would finally reclaim what had been stolen, my dignity, my life, my narrative. The day of the reveal, I watched from a distance as the news went live. Headlines screamed fraud, manipulation, and betrayal. Social media exploded with outrage and disbelief. Damien's empire hemorrhaged value within hours. Marin's glossy persona crumbled online. Investors and partners withdrew support in waves. I had anticipated the shock, the anger, the humiliation, and yet the real satisfaction was in their silence, forced, stunned, defeated. Every lie they had told for years, every betrayal they had inflicted, was now undeniable, laid bare for the world to see. This wasn't spectacle, it was accountability, and it was beautiful. The meticulous planning, the patience, the network of insiders I had cultivated, all of it culminated in this moment. No one suspected me, no one connected the dots, and yet my fingerprints were everywhere. As I observed their crumbling world, I finally understood the true power of patience, intelligence, and resilience. They had underestimated me for years, and now the tables had turned. Despite the public collapse, Damien sought me. He cornered me at an industry event, smug, expecting confrontation. I walked calmly, letting him stew in confusion. "You think this is over?" he sneered, eyes blazing. "I built this empire." I let a quiet smile creep onto my face. "And I've dismantled it," I said. Every word landed with precision, exposing the arrogance and entitlement he had wielded over others. He sputtered, attempting excuses, blaming others, but I interrupted, recounting betrayals, lies, and manipulations, publicly undeniable yet quietly delivered. Marin's face drained of color nearby. Their shock was tangible. My calm control was terrifying to them. For the first time, I realized the depth of empowerment that comes from surviving humiliation, from observing, waiting, and striking strategically. This wasn't vengeance through violence. It was calculated, deliberate, psychological triumph. They had underestimated resilience and patience, thinking power came from wealth alone. I had proved them wrong. The empire that once seemed untouchable was gone. Damien and Marin faced legal scrutiny, financial ruin, and social disgrace. Investors abandoned them, colleagues whispered truths, and the media painted a relentless picture of exposure and downfall. Meanwhile, I walked forward, reclaiming my life publicly, taking back my dignity and narrative. I had endured years of manipulation, humiliation, and betrayal, but I had survived. My victories were quiet, strategic, and satisfying. A public vindication, a personal catharsis, a reminder that intelligence, patience, and resilience always outlast arrogance. The ex-con, dismissed and mocked, had built the tools of justice and wielded them flawlessly. My name, my story, my dignity were mine again. And as I watched the remnants of their empire crumble, I realized that true power comes not from wealth or influence, but from the courage to rise after being broken, to take back what was stolen, and to finally write the ending yourself. The aftermath was surreal. Damien and Marin vanished from public life, leaving a trail of betrayed partners, shattered trust, and scandalized media. I received messages from people I had never met, former employees, investors, even friends, apologizing, admitting they had doubted me. I ignored most, knowing their remorse meant nothing. What mattered was my reclamation. The empire they had built on manipulation was nothing but ashes, a testament to the fragile nature of power when it's based on deceit. I moved quietly, reclaiming my space, my business contacts, my voice. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened. The pressure, the humiliation, the sleepless nights, they all faded as the world recognized the truth. I wasn't defined by their cruelty. I was defined by my resilience. Every calculated move, every silent observation, every strategic alliance had led to this moment. And I realized something profound. Vengeance is satisfying, but justice, true, unwavering justice, is transformative. With their empire dismantled, opportunities unexpectedly opened. Former allies who once ignored me now sought partnership, intrigued by my intelligence and composure. I declined most, choosing instead to build my own venture, ethical, transparent, and respected. Every contract I signed, every investment I made, carried the weight of experience and survival. I had learned that trust must be earned, and that true power lies in reputation, integrity, and strategic patience. The scars from betrayal were still there, but they were no longer weaknesses, they were badges of survival. My personal life flourished too. Friendships deepened, and mentors I had admired for years reached out. I discovered that the world rewards resilience more than wealth. Damien and Marin had underestimated me, believing the world followed their rules. I had rewritten those rules, and now, each step I took, each decision I made, was a deliberate assertion of independence, intelligence, and control. My life was no longer theirs to manipulate. Media outlets began covering the fall of Damien and Marin as a case study, citing my meticulous approach to uncovering the truth. Interviews, profiles, and features highlighted my strategic intelligence, resilience, and courage. I became a symbol, not of vengeance, but of empowerment. Audiences resonated with my story, the underdog who endured betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation, and emerged victorious through wit and patience. Every article, every feature reinforced that justice is not about anger, it's about reclaiming your narrative. People reached out, sharing their own stories of betrayal and triumph, drawing inspiration from my journey. It was surreal to realize the ripple effect. My victory wasn't just personal, it inspired others to confront injustice in their own lives. And yet, I remained grounded. Fame was secondary. The true reward was self-respect, clarity, and the ability to walk through life unashamed, unapologetic, and in control. The empire of lies had crumbled, and in its place, a new reality was built, one I authored, fully aware of its worth and integrity. Amid the chaos, an unexpected ally emerged, someone from Damien's inner circle, quietly observing, now seeking reconciliation. They revealed secrets even I hadn't known, backdoor deals, manipulations, and betrayals that had fueled the empire's rise. Together, we strategized ways to ensure the damage couldn't be reversed, that their deceit remained exposed and accountability was permanent. This alliance wasn't born of friendship. It was a calculated move for justice. Yet it revealed an important truth. Even those close to villains can recognize morality, and sometimes the unexpected partnerships are the most powerful. I realized that redemption isn't only personal, it can be systemic, creating structures where betrayal and manipulation are less likely to thrive. And so, I didn't just take back my life. I fortified the world around me, ensuring that intelligence, patience, and integrity could outlast cruelty and deception. Every decision, every alliance, every action was deliberate, ensuring that the empire built on lies could never rise again. Standing in my office, overlooking a city I had once felt powerless against, I reflected on the journey. Years of betrayal, manipulation, and humiliation had forged a version of me I didn't know existed, strong, patient, strategic, and unbreakable. I had witnessed cruelty, endured injustice, and survived darkness. But in that survival, I had discovered the ultimate power, the ability to reclaim my life on my own terms. Damien and Marin were shadows of the empire they once held. I was the architect of my own destiny. The world had witnessed the fall of false authority, the triumph of resilience, and the power of truth. And in that victory, I found freedom, not just revenge, not just justice, but the satisfaction of knowing my story was mine to tell. The billionaire empire they built could never overshadow the strength and wisdom forged from betrayal. In losing nothing but fear, I gained everything: identity, dignity, and the knowledge that no one could ever define me again.